Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Going Dotty. I'm Trace Egan, and in today's video within the Ego series, we're going to be looking at what it's like when we're projected on by an ego and what it's like when an ego throws a mirror up to us. So let's get into it. When we're looking at this topic, one of the first things that we really want to bear in mind as a foundational point is that the ego's way of manifesting and creating within its life is internally. It's all about the ego's sense of perception. The ego is not able to mold the natural forces and the natural creational flows of life. So the ego is forced to rely on its mental body construct and its internal system. So creation and life happening for ego is all about what's going on inside and upstairs. It's all about their thoughts. It's all about what's going on in their headspace and what they perceive to be happening for them through the interactions with others in their world. But because so much of the ego's type of creation, it is using its mental body energy, it is seeking to fulfill its mental body energy, it uses and relies on the mental body energy of other people around it, and then it uses other people as fuel to keep its own sense of self, its own narratives, its own storylines buoyant. So really what we can say is when we're engaging with an ego and when we're interacting with an ego, it's their mental body that is at play, and it is our mental body, it is the mental layer of our energetic system that is the buffer for that with an ego. Projection, it's where we look at others and we accuse them of our vices. We cannot acknowledge, we cannot admit to the flaws within the self, and yet those flaws exist within our world. And however, for an ego, because projection is one of its primary ways of creating within itself, within its mental body sphere, projection becomes a major tool for the ego to make its life and its world happen. So as we've discussed before, the ego is all about having narratives, it's all about having scripts. It's all about having characters in its world that enact its play, its show, and that carry out for it what it wants to do. So one of the ways that the ego communicates this script is by projecting that script onto another person. They quite literally just throw the imaginary script of what is occurring or what they would like to occur, and they throw it onto somebody else. And when this is happening to us, we feel this in our force field. We feel it around us. We feel it in our space. We don't always really know what's going on, and therefore it can feel very uncomfortable. Intuitively, you might be able to sense that something isn't quite right, but because you haven't been clued into what's really going on, you're left in a very shaky, vulnerable position because you're engaging in a moment, in a situation, or a reality, and it's not true reality. It's not an objective reality. It's not shared between you. You have become part of an ego's subjective experience, and that ego has expectations that it expects you to fulfill for it. An ego essentially throws the landscape of its mind's eye out into the external, and it expects other people to uphold and reinforce that for the ego. People, places, events, situations, experiences hold too many layers of meaning and symbology for the ego. The ego is seeking to elicit a certain conjunction point. It is seeking for something specific to be happening to it, depending on what's going on within itself and what's going on within its story. It's seeking for the next part of the jigsaw piece to come to fruition and fall into place. So there's an awful lot of personal investment on the behalf of the ego that goes into these situations, and they are very much overly identified with what goes on in the world around them at certain times, and therefore can very much micromanage the movements of other people. And when we are being micromanaged, again, you feel that in your space. You know, you're not in your own personal space. Your personal space has been absorbed by the inner eye of the ego, and we can very much feel this within our force field. It's uncomfortable even when you have good boundaries and you have your own well-built mental body health system and structure where it doesn't deplete you. but you still perceive it. You still know that it's going on. And what's happening with projection is it's a form of manipulation. The ego is using your movements and micromanaging your flow and using those moments to paint the landscape of its own internal inner eye and perception. Your actions are painting the rooms of its mind. And what will happen later is the ego will use these moments to fuel their sense of self, what's happening for them, what's happening in their life and world. And this is where we come across the concept of people using you for energy fuel. They're stealing your chi. They are pulling your chi from your system and they are pulling it into their own to use it within themselves, to use it within their mental body, for it to satisfy and fulfill their emotional structure. And within the Going Dotty system, we can understand projection to be a more evolved form of creation than mirroring. We can also understand projection really relies on the masculine structure. You know, the chi forces. Energy can be broken down into two primary units, masculine and feminine, yin and yang, black and white. There's this duality, there's this polarity system, the system of opposites that we operate within. The masculine is about structure, information, data, whereas the feminine is more about space, flow, feeling. So within this, I suggest that projection is more using a masculine energy and a masculine element, and it is therefore a slightly more evolved level to its counterpart, which is mirroring. Mirroring is less complex, it's less evolved. Mirroring is a very primary element of human dynamics and relationships. Mirroring from a traditional psychological perspective is essentially like mimicking. We copy each other, patterns, words, phrases, gestures. We mirror others as a way to signal that we're comfortable with each other, that we are safe with each other, that we like each other. Say that mirroring is more about gaining mental fuel. Like in mirroring, the ego will think about it later. They will pull on it after the event. Whereas projection is more about mental body energy fulfillment in the moment. And then they use that fulfillment to narrate the next threads of occurrence that the ego is wanting to come about and bring into situation. I think we can break mirroring down into three main categories of how it occurs. The first one would be when an ego drops a mirror. When the ego comes across somebody known to them or unknown to them insofar as inaccessible. It might be a public figure, it might be a celebrity, this kind of thing. When the ego comes across somebody that it identifies with, that it admires in some way, that it has placed in an exalted role, when the ego would like to perceive itself as being equal to this other individual, it will drop a mirror. It will align itself psychologically and it will allow an identification thread to occur between it and the object of its mirror. The ego can then use this mirror to fuel its thoughts of self. And it's all about fulfilling the inner identification, the inner narrative, the inner story, the life really of the ego as they're living it. It's kind of like fueling their dreams of the future, but living the energy of that now in a very false, ungrounded way and manner. The next element of mirroring for an ego is when they throw a mirror out like bait. They throw it out there, they place it in front of the person. Sometimes with a mirror we can feel it around us and behind us. We can feel ourselves being encapsulated in this space. But in this particular inflection, the ego is throwing a mirror out because it's testing the waters. It's trying to see how the other individual will interact with that, how they are going to parlay with it, how much of it they are going to accept. So it's a little bit about testing the ground. And once that mirror has been accepted, willingly partakes in this new level of script, this new placement and positioning. And when an ego throws a mirror out initially, it might very well hold itself in good manners for a certain period of time until it finds itself secure within the dynamic, within the position, and that's when the ego will then turn around, make it about a power play, a power dynamic, The final element of mirroring is when we are forced into a veil. If you take the example of somebody who is at work, they will mask, they'll hold themselves in a certain manner, and they will mirror a pattern for reflection that they don't really truly feel. They're not really connected to it. Now, that kind of opens us up into a different conversation altogether. How draining it can be when we are forced to maintain a pattern or hold a mirror or uphold ourselves to a mirror that we don't really like, we don't really feel, the internal resources that are required for that. One of the things that we find with egos is that they really rely on the social fabric, and this is where I feel so much damage can really occur. The ego really relies on the power and the force field that it can hold itself in, depending on the social dynamic that it's engaged in and what's going on. So it could be that an ego places more pressure on an individual during a public event, a situation, because it knows that in that moment the person that it is placing pressure on will conform due to the pressure of the social situation. So there is this level of abuse within the social fabric and the nature of human interactions. And when it is so prevalent in the world nowadays that people are acting in this kind of manner, we can really see why it's detrimental, and we can also appreciate that what it's like for the generations that are coming up into a world where this is the world that they are growing up and coming into. A very false world, a very fake world. That's it for today's overview on mirroring and projection. This is quite a large topic, and I certainly hope to get into it in more detail in the future. Please let me know if you've any comments or any questions on this particular one. Like the video, subscribe. Thanks very much for your time, and I will chat to you guys again. So look after yourselves.